Hello and welcome back to another video. It is Thrawn's Revenge here. Sorry I've been gone for so long. I got sick. My whole family got sick of COVID. I was stuck in my room. I had a diet that I was restricted on that didn't allow me to have coffee, so I was basically falling asleep all the time. But we're back, and now that we're back, I thought I'd do an interesting little video here. And today the video is about scaling and measurements. So, as you see, I have three different tanks that I've designed. We have the AAC-1, we have the 2M repulsor tank, and the TX-130. Now, when I build vehicles, I usually try to stick with the lore numbers as close as possible. Sometimes this can be really challenging, mostly because maybe the lore is not accurate, or maybe you see one image and another image, and the numbers just aren't adding up. Maybe the amount of crew in it are different. There's a lot of things that can make this process really difficult. So first we'll start with like a base, a standard, right? The standard that I use is a minifig. The reason I use a minifig is because, as you know, a minifig stands 4 blocks tall, and a minifig is what we're going to base everything on, right? Because this is what is inside our vehicles, so this tends to be the easiest thing to work off of. Minifigs have one massive flaw. They are not proportionate to a human being, even slightly, which is what kind of makes or breaks your builds most of the time, in my opinion, is that the minifig is wider than it is taller if you compare it to a human being. A minifig is 4 studs long, which is much longer than a human should be if you put them in Lego scale, and they are 4 blocks tall, right? So how I do it is I assume the height of a minifig to be average human height without hair. So if I take Thrawn's hair off, right? That right here, focus, there we go. That right here is the average human height. The average human height, according to Google, is about 1.7 meters. This is my scale. I base all of my builds off of this. There are times when that just doesn't work, and I'll show you that as we go through some of these as examples. So, using this as my scale, right, let's look at the TX-130 first. So the TX-130, according to Legends, has a length of 8.2 meters, a width of 3.05 meters, and a height of 2.3 meters. Using just the length, I usually base my builds after that, because I will use a lot of images and a lot of references. Because this is the Battlefront 2 EA version of the TX-130, that complicates things. If you've seen the cross-sections of the TX-130, according to the cross-sections, this should fit almost 4 people. At this scale, fitting 4 people is very difficult, and this is one of the things that comes in scaling when you build your vehicles, is deciding what do you want to base your build off of. Because I was making the TX-130 based off of Battlefront 2 EA's version, I based this model closer to canon stats than legend stats. One of the benefits this gave me is that canon does not have actual length, width, and height measurements. So I based it all off of images. I found images of the TX-130 next to Battlefront 2 troops, and based everything off of that. I found an image from the tabletop games, I think it's Star Wars Legions, and it had an image of what they thought the canon interior of the TX-130 is. It is why it only fits 1 person. If you were to go into the Legends, you have the numbers, but the numbers kind of don't make sense if you look at the different images, right? And then that also brings up how Lego does things, right? Lego will kind of skew values here and there to fit an aesthetic that they're kind of going for, right? A kid is not going to care that this is accurate, right? A kid is going to want to care that it fits who he wants it to fit and it plays the way he wants it to play. So, for example, a big controversy that happened was the new TX-130, the Lego Republic tank that they recently released with Mace Windu that came out just this year. Here is its scale. It is roughly in length, fairly accurate. The place where it fails is it's in width and its height. It is too fat and it's too tall. And thus there's a lot of people who have made modifications of it. For example, you can check Solid Bricks Studios. He has a really good modification to make it closer to the height, but not the width. So, Lego does things differently, right? I try to keep things as close to the values as possible, but there are times that doesn't always work, and we'll get to that after. So, another example is the 2M repulsor tank. Now, this says it is 10 meters long, right? So it should be roughly 5-ish, 6-ish minifigs. I have checked this, it is roughly 5-ish, 6-ish minifigs. But it doesn't state how many people are in it. And so when I was building this model, I decided upon myself how many people I felt should be able to fit in this. I kind of use the TX-130 as a base platform of there's a commander and there's 2 gunners. But because the side sponsons aren't here and it only has the top turret, I felt a single gunner was acceptable. 1 driver also can run as the commander, and 1 gunner for the turret on the top. That to me felt right. And another thing that made it really easy to do with 2 people is the fact that in the system that I have here, 2 people fit the nicest without it being too uncomfortable and without complicating too much of the build. If I built this a little different and had more pieces available, I might be able to fit 3 minifigs in this, but it is what it is. I got it. I felt comfortable with how I have it set up, mostly because there's not a lot of information on this vehicle, and there are huge differences between Canon and Legends, because the Legends is basing it off of the Empire at War video games, and Canon is basing it off the mobile game, which is very chunky and chubby, and the values aren't going to be as correct, because it's a stylistic choice, right? And then we get into the AAC-1. So the AAC-1 in Canon in Legends, is supposed to be between 5.6 to 5.7 meters. This is not that size. It's just straight up not that size. It is actually bigger than that. And the reason I made it bigger was the deciding factor was the minifig. That is why I had to break the size limitations for this build, is because in the game, in Battlefront, the original, right, these cockpits are much, much smaller. So I had 2 options. I could either make it lore accurate, but I felt it would look worse to try to make it more accurate, or I make it not accurate and fit closer to the scale that I felt the minifig is. So instead of basing it off of the minifig's height, I based it off of the minifig's width, and that made it much easier to build this model, in my opinion. I built my model based off of someone else's model on Flickr, which is why it uses these 2 bubble canopies. And these 2 bubble canopies made my scale. Because that's how I decided to build this, that decided everything else after. And so that is why this model is a lot bigger than it should be, because it should be close to this. It should be similar. Sorry, I gotta move some stuff around. It should be in similar scale to this, but it's not. It is in similar scale to this, even though this is supposed to be bigger, right? But I felt that from other models that I have seen people try to do a scale-accurate version of this. I felt the model looked uncomfortable, the model looked very skeletal, and the model looked very flimsy. And those are things that I prefer not to have in my builds. I want my builds to be as solid as possible, and so I went with a different scaling for this. Is it not accurate? Yes. Do I think it is better because of it? Also yes. So these are things that when you're building, you have to keep in mind of all these things, right? Another example is the T2B. The T2B, according to lore, is supposed to fit 3 people and a droid. If you look at a T2B in images, it could fit 3 people because the people are so thin, right? But we're dealing with Lego people. They are not thin. So I was only able to fit 2 people comfortably in my T2B. That's somewhere where I feel, it's the differences of mediums, right? If you're building it out of like actual materials like metals and cardboards and cardstock and stuff, you were building a model that was supposed to have like figurines in it, you could probably fit those 3 people. But because I'm making it in Lego, I just couldn't find a way to fit the 3 people comfortably, so I did 2 people. It's the same thing with the TX-130. It's the same with all my models. I always base it off of both trying to get it as close to the lore numbers, but also making it look good and not unstable, which is a hard balance. And That's why I think scales are very, very important. So hopefully this helps you with some of your builds and helps you try to figure out your own scaling, whether you want to go for the minifig width or the minifig height. I usually recommend going height first and then going width if that doesn't work, or build a piece that you feel is the most significant, something that is like, that is the shape that I want, or that specific piece I want to base everything else off of. That's another great way to do it. I did kind of a similar thing with this guy. This nose was the first thing I actually built, and I kind of built my scaling off of that nose, and it also just happened to work out that it's about the same size when it comes to the minifig. So I was very happy that that actually just worked out. This one I did build from the ground up, based off of its stats that I felt were accurate to the images I was looking at. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Couple of updates on my side. I've been trying to get back on the horse, so there will most likely be an Instagram post at some point. I have also joined a new Discord server. The image of the Discord server is here. The link to the Discord server is down below. You will be able to kind of be there and be able to talk to me on Discord, and then you'll also see my updates of things that I'm working on. If you don't have Instagram, things like model updates, instruction updates, all that kind of jazz. I'll be using the server until I grow much larger, which probably won't be for a little while. So that's all I got for now. So thank you so much, and I'll see y'all next time. Peace.